Hello and welcome, compatriots, Compatriot Academy. Today's talk will be on Zizek, the episode of CTMU through modern philosophy on the big four philosophers. This one today is on Slavoj Zizek, the Slovenian philosopher. Zizek almost became president of Slovenia in an election, I think in 89 or 88, 1988. But he is self-described as a Stalinist. He says, if you give me power, I know how to use it because I'm a Stalinist. Right? He's a character. I think he masquerades as a liberal now because he's kind of capitulated to the values of liberalism. But he decries authoritarian capitalism, rightly so. But what he espouses to replace it with is a new dialectical materialism, a new communism. And we'll see exactly in this talk where his formulation falls down and fails, and why Christopher Langen's formulation is a restoration of the natural order of being, of reinstantiating the natural order, of against materialism, against mechanism, against atheism, against communism, all reinstated in the truth telling of the CTMU. But the thesis, no further delay, the thesis is that Zizek imparts a distinct synthesis of Hegelian Lacanian philosophy. It should be noted that Hegel is actually a Christian philosopher, but Zizek appropriates him. He imparts a distinct synthesis of Hegelian Lacanian philosophy, reading one through the other. His school and his mission is nothing short of a presage towards communist revolution. Think it first, then act it, where politics is applied to philosophy. Zizek's formulation stands as instruction for would-be thought revolutionaries from which we can learn. So in learning, Zizek has these nuggets of wisdom and this truth and speaking towards being a thought revolutionary, because he is a thought revolutionary, because opposed to authoritarian capitalism, there's many undercurrent ideologies. He's one of the undercurrent ideologies opposing authoritarian capitalism. It just so happens that his ideology is false, is on its conception. But he is very instructive in how to impart a thought revolutionary. I think that I watched a thing where the British journalist, the English journalist Will Self, criticized Zizek and said, "Well, what now? Where's the revolution? What has your thought actually done?" And Zizek was taken aback because Zizek has good manners. This guy had bad manners. Will Self had bad manners, and he was attacking Zizek. And Zizek was basically saying, "No, the revolution comes in the mind first." He was almost an idealist, like Hegel, the original Hegel. He says, "I want to be more like Hegel than Marx." Zizek says, "I want to be more like Hegel than Marx." So the real revolution is an idealistic revolution in the mind first. So that's where Zizek aims his attempts and his aims at persuasion of the mind. Point one, getting into the philosophical background of Zizek, and we do discuss how this is modern philosophy, so this is metaphysics of the past 200 years. So aptly, the German idealists with Kant and Hegel fit into this. So the first point of this lecture is Zizek appropriates Hegel's thought in there's three aspects of Hegel's thought that Zizek appropriates. First is the self-reflective moment of spirit. Second is appearance as essence. Third is the antagonism of a gap or split in reality is transposed onto reality itself, onto the phenomenon and the noumena at once. The gap in reality, the split or gap or a fundamental antagonism of reality is transposed onto reality itself, the things in themselves, and also our ideas of them. So these are the 3 points. I'll break each one down. So first, he appropriates Hegel's thought of the self-reflective moment of spirit. So in Hegel wrote many things on the notion and the spirit and the movement of spirit and the moment of spirit. And what he was all saying is that there comes a moment in the unfolding of world events, in the unfolding of an individual's life, in the unfolding of an individual's life or world events, where the spirit of God is incarnate in that person, and that person looks and self-reflects and reflects on themselves on being the moment of spirit incarnate. They reflect. There's a moment when the world's spirit reflects on itself. So let's say Hegel was talking about what he's in the city of Jena in Germany, in Prussia, and he saw Napoleon riding through after he had conquered the Prussian armies, and he said, "There goes the world's spirit." It's a famous line from Hegel. There goes the world's spirit. So there comes a moment, whether it be in a political avatar, a political leader, that they self-reflect, or it could come in an individual's life and the day-to-day struggle of an individual. that there comes a moment when the spirit self-reflects and recognizes itself, reflects, recognizes, and recollects itself, and really comes to understand its true subjectivity, its true incarnation moment of spirit. Point 2, appearance as essence. So this is a very important point that both what's his name, Zizek, I forget the other fellow's name, but I think Frederick Jameson Frederick Jameson, I believe, is the other one. They say Hegel, they're popular Hegelian scholars. They both say appearance is essence. So when I'm holding a cup, let's say it's a goblet or a opaque cup, like a black cup. The appearance of the cup, how I actually grasp it, how it looks to my eyes, to my vision, its color, its opacity, its solidness, its diameter, everything. This appearance is the essence of the cup. Just like when you look at me, my eyes, my beard, my nose, my face, my shoulders, my arms, my expression, the appearance of my subjectivity is the essence of my subjectivity. So how I appear to you is the essence of my subjectivity. Or how the chair appears. The chair appears and it's solid. It's got 4 legs and I can sit on it. The appearance is the essence. So this is very important when you talk about the Kantian duality of phenomena and noumena, and I always get these two confused. But Kant said that the noumena is the reality that we cannot access. Noumena is the reality that we cannot access with our thoughts or our sensation or our senses, and phenomenon is how we do access it. But what Hegel actually said was that no, the appearance of the object is actually how it is in reality, and that's appearance as essence. It's known as appearance as essence. And point 3, to carry on here, Zizek through Hegel says that Hegel said this: the split or gap in reality. So there's a hole at the center, black hole at the center of my subjectivity. There seems to be tension and sin in the world, but the split or gap in reality is transposed onto reality itself and onto even God himself, the big other, as Zizek would say, because Zizek doesn't believe in God. But the split or gap or tension in reality, the antagonism of reality, is transposed onto both reality and our experience of reality. It's not just that we have a failure of experience, it's that the gap or antagonism in reality is transposed onto reality itself, onto the noumena, onto the inaccessible, as well as the phenomenon, right? As the noumena, the inaccessible reality, like the imperceptible qualities of reality, the gap or split or tension or antagonism in reality is transposed onto reality itself and our experience of reality, the phenomena, the noumena and the phenomena. Point 2, then he gets into Lacanian anti-philosophy. It should be noted that he reads Hegel through Lacan, Lacan through Hegel, because they complement each other on this axis of thought. Weirdly, because they're so different as thinkers, but they weirdly complement each other, because Lacanian, as I'll get here, Lacanian anti-philosophy. Lacan was called by the philosopher Alain Badiou an anti-philosopher, and he came along and Lacan had these. I'll get to the 3 aspects of Lacan that Zizek really dives into. The first is the division of reality into a tripartite Gordian knot, like a 3-ring knot, symbolic, real, imaginary. Then the death drive, then the mirror stage, then the object petita. All these things together. I'll break each one down right now. So Lacan divided reality into 3 tripartite rings, a Gordian knot, and it should be said that he borrowed a lot of his ideas from other philosophers and just gave them a psychoanalytic tinge or flavor. But first he divided into symbolic, real, and imaginary. So what is this? Symbolic is our language. And if you notice, our language has gaps, or it glosses over, or it misses certain things, or there's antagonism built underneath the language, and that's called the symbolic. Our language is called the symbolic. Our representational mind is called the symbolic. And Lacan liked to point out that we have gaps and blind spots in our language. We have parts where we cannot see into the real of reality, which is the second part of the Gordian knot. The real is like the noumena. It's the inaccessible reality that we cannot sense or grasp or even think, but it appears the same way that gravity appears. It's an all-encompassing force. The real, it's called the real. So we have the symbolic, which is our language, roughly speaking. The real, which is this noumena, this inaccessible reality that impinges on our horizon, on our ontological horizon. Our ontology being our theory of being in nature. The real impinges like gravity or magnetic fields on our reality. The real, it's called. And then third is the imaginary, which is our fantasy. So our fantasy guides a lot of our lives. Our psychic drives, our dreams, our ideation is the imaginary. So we have this Gordian knot: symbolic, real, imaginary. That's it in short order. Two, the second point of Lacan is the death drive. So Zizek says there's a black hole at the center of our subjectivity, and Lacan said this, and I think Freud said this as well. There's a black hole at the center of our subjectivity, a fundamental antagonism, and the death drive is circling around this black hole at the center of your subjectivity. That you've heard the expression, the God-shaped hole in our heart. The God-shaped hole in our heart, circling around it and kind of acting around the black hole at the center of our subjectivity, doing bad habits, doing bad sins, doing bad repetitious behavior around that ill-gotten black hole at the center of our subjectivity. This is called the death drive. And Zizek says, with the death drive, you're almost animated like a zombie or an undead spirit. With the death drive, you're almost animated like an undead spirit. So bad habits are a good example, a good practical example. Bad habits are almost like you're trying to deal with your subjectivity, the black hole of your subjectivity. And the death drive is what your actions, the habits, and repetitious behavior that happens around that black hole at the center of your subjectivity. Two, mirror stage. Mirror stage, quite simply, is looking at the mirror, reflecting on yourself, and trying to posit yourself. And there's an expression in the Bible that says, a man will observe his natural face in a mirror, but then he'll forget it 2 seconds later after he looks away. And this is kind of what Lacan was talking about. He's talking about how man, when he's growing up through childhood, when he reaches the age of, I think, 3.5 or 2.5 or 4, somewhere in that area, I forget which one, I'm sorry. But the mirror stage says he finally understands that he's a subject. He posits he looks in the mirror, he sees himself, and he posits a concept of himself as a subject. I think monkeys can do this, and I think dolphins can do this, but human beings are the example par excellence and the prime operators with the mirror stage, where they can actually reflect and posit a concept of their subjectivity by looking in the mirror. And finally, the all-important part of all this ties together, the object petit a. The object petit a is the black hole. The name for the black hole at the center of our subjectivity is the object petit a, or object petit a. I'm Canadian, so I say a. Object petit a, as Lacan would call it. So with all this, how do you read Hegel through Lacan, Lacan through Hegel? Well, remember, Hegel was a self-reflective moment of spirit. So with Lacan's mirror stage, we can understand, with Lacan's mirror stage and self-reflecting and positing the concept to yourself, we can understand how spirit reflects on the moment, on itself in the moment, in recognition, reflection, and recollection. And this ties in with the mirror stage. With appearance as essence, this ties in with roughly appearance as essence and the phenomena-noumena divide that Kant instantiated, that Hegel followed, that Zizek followed up. The phenomena-noumena divide can be broken down into the Lacanian symbolic, real, imaginary. The tripartite imposition on reality that Lacan had can make sense of phenomena and noumena, where, let's say, phenomena is a combination of the symbolic and the imaginary, and noumena is the real. That's roughly speaking how it is. The symbolic and imaginary of the 3 rings of Lacan's things: symbolic, real, imaginary. Symbolic and imaginary fit phenomena. We experience them. They're in our mind. And then the real is like the noumena, the inaccessible reality. And then the death drive and object petit a together speak of the fundamental antagonism in reality that we spoke of with Hegel, how Hegel transposed a gap or split or antagonism or tension of reality onto reality itself. Our phenomena and our noumena, the inaccessible reality itself, has a gap or split or antagonism in it. And the death drive and object petit a speak to this. The black hole at the center of subjectivity speaks to the fact that there is an antagonism in reality. So getting how you see that, you can see how Zizek makes sense of Hegel through Lacan through Hegel, because they have complementary ideas. And an anti-philosophy, when it's put against a philosophy, has really critical and aspect that can read aspects of the philosophy mutually through each other. Point 3, Zizek, this is a long talk and it's quite deep, so I apologize if it's kind of a whirlwind. Point 3, a new dialectical materialism. So Zizek, it's funny because Stalin wrote a short 40, 50-page essay for the Soviet school system on dialectical materialism. That was the official philosophy of the Bolsheviks and of the communists after Marx, and Marx imparted this to them. Marx took everything that Hegel did, and Hegel was a movement of spirit. Marx made that a movement of material, because Marx was ultimately a materialist. And it's actually his most resounding legacy is that most scientists today are materialists, because Marx was a materialist. But Zizek imparts a new dialectical materialism, and he opposes this to the Stalinist dialectical materialism. Stalin made the dialectical materialism, which the old dialectical materialism under Stalin and the communists and Lenin and Marx held that reality was a whole that interconnected everywhere, that there was a whole that interpenetration of opposites and a whole that connected everywhere. So that one part has an effect on every other part, like a tree has an effect on the whole forest. That there's leaps in a single day, there's leaps and bounds where a revolution takes place, and that there's antagonisms that have to be overcome. That was the old dialectical materialism. Zizek modifies this and produces a DM2, what he calls DM2, the new dialectical materialism, or dialectical materialism point 2, which is that whereas it is a penetration of opposites, but sometimes there's isolated, he says, instead of the interpenetration of whole opposites and synthesis, sometimes there's isolation, cuts, antagonisms, and small parts not being integrated into the whole. Sometimes where there's a whole, instead of it being a whole system, there's small isolated pockets that never undergo interpenetration of opposites or synthesis. And then instead of leaps and bounds of the revolution, instead of revolution taking form in leaps and bounds, sometimes there's 2 steps forwards and 1 step back. Sometimes there's small incremental gains. Sometimes there's huge reversals. So he's trying to update dialectical materialism to deal with the real material condition of communism in the present day, how communism was defeated. Zizek is trying to rationalize this. And then finally, Zizek says there's antagonism across reality, all of reality itself. So that's a new dialectical materialism of Zizek. I hope that was clear to you. Point 4. So for Zizek, the important point is to think and act, think and then act the revolution, and politics is applied philosophy. So for Zizek, he says now is the time to think, and instead of acting, we should think. Instead of causing the revolution, we should take time to reflect and pause and stand back and think. I think he takes after Lenin, where Lenin delayed the revolution from 1905 to 1917. And for the year prior to the revolution, with the liberal Kerensky government in Russia, Lenin was saying, no, it's not time for a revolution yet. We must read Hegel's Science. We must read Hegel's Science of Logic. He was reading it on the train over to Russia, I believe, into Finland, when he's being shot back into Russia, injected as a revolutionary into Russia by the train that went through Swiss Alps and Germany and into Finland. And then he was deposited into Russia. And then a year later, he caused a revolution. But Lenin was always saying, no, it's time to read, time to study, time to think. So Zizek takes after Lenin when he says, it's time to think and reflect rather than act politically. And then Zizek's friend Elaine Badiou said, politics is applied philosophy. So for Zizek, he thinks that it goes back to Plato. Even Plato said the art of philosophy must be given to politics, right? Basically, with the philosopher kings. So Zizek agrees with that, and that's what he's aiming at ultimately with all of his thought. Point 5, where Zizek fails, where Zizek's formulation fails. I would say everywhere, in every facet, every formulation, every pillar of foundation of Zizek, he rests on pillars of sand. He's going to be washed away because there's a bankruptcy. He is an atheist. Zizek is an atheist, materialist, communist. Atheism, we know, is false because we believe in the triune God of Christianity. Materialism, we know that it's not that we don't believe in material, but we don't believe in materialism. We don't believe in the dead movement of carbon, the dead movement, automatic automaton movement of carbon, where it's just energy crashing and dissipating in carbon forms taking shape. As he says in the show Hannibal, orchestrations of carbon. We are made of carbon, but we're not just reducible to materialism, as Zizek would have us believe in his dialectical materialism. And finally, communism. Communism, we know, is an ideology that is worse than the thing it seeks to replace. The medicine that has worse symptoms than what it seeks to replace, which is authoritarian capitalism. Although we do agree in the critique of authoritarian capitalism. So Zizek fails everywhere, I would say, from his very foundations. His very bedrock of his belief is a bankruptcy, a wash away sand. The bankruptcy of the atheism, materialism, communism, where now, in this final point, point 5, Langen is the true restoration of the natural order. That's what's so beautiful about the CTMU. It has faithful belief to God. It restores the natural order. It refutes atheism. It refutes materialism. It refutes communism. So that's why I tell you, I'm trying to repeat this over and over again. Langen's CTMU isn't just some academic quibbling. It's a whole, not just a scientific revolution, but a whole plan that counteracts the whole globalist paradigm, the whole atheist paradigm, the whole secularist paradigm. That Langen, when he refutes atheism, when he's refuting atheism, materialism, dualism, and communism. He is reproducing a whole new plan for civilization, for Western civilization, at its root, radical at its root, and laying in CTMU is a restoration of the natural order, of the created order, of the Christian order, I believe. So with all this, I leave you a long lecture. I apologize for the length, but this gets to the root. This gets all thoroughly through Zizek. So this will be episode, I think, 5 or 6 of the CTMU through modern philosophy. I hope this is good for you. It's good for me. Until next time, take care. God bless. In the name of Jesus Christ. Amen. Bye-bye.